This set of notes is about the road to the Civil War. We're going to be taking a look at some of the events leading up in the last couple of years to the outbreak of fighting in the Civil War. So our last set of notes talked about the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Before that, we talked about the Compromise of 1850. And one of the pieces of the Compromise of 1850 was a strong fugitive slave law, which, if you remember, said that people in the North were required by law to return runaway slaves, and they could face punishment if they didn't. Well, naturally, many Northerners were really upset about the fugitive slave law, so a lot of them decided they would not obey it. In fact, several states in the North passed personal liberty laws, which said they actually did not have to obey the fugitive slave law. And Northerners continued to help runaway slaves even though it was against a United States law. You can imagine people in the South were very upset about this. They were mad at the North for not following the fugitive slave law, but the Northerners didn't care. Another important event that led to more tension and more fighting between the North and South was a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. This was written by a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe, and it was a bestseller. The novel was about slavery, and in particular, it showed the brutality of slavery and just how rough and brutal the system was. And this book convinced many Northerners to oppose slavery even more strongly than before. Southerners continued to want to expand, and so they convinced Congress to pass the Kansas-Nebraska Act. We talk about this in our last set of notes more closely. But Kansas and Nebraska had been closed to slavery, but the law now said that people there could decide for themselves whether they wanted to have slavery. When Kansas was ready to become a state, the pro-slavery people and the anti-slavery people basically had a civil war in the state of Kansas to decide the issue. And it was so rough that Kansas got the nickname Bleeding Kansas. In 1857, the Supreme Court got involved in this rising tension with the decision about slavery that really angered people in the North. It centered on a slave named Dred Scott. And Dred Scott argued that he should be a free man because he had spent many years living in free territory. The Supreme Court came back and disagreed. They said that Congress actually had no right to bar slavery in the territories at all, since slaves were property, and Congress could not take away people's property rights. So that meant that Dred Scott was still a slave. And that really infuriated Northerners. The last event we're going to talk about is John Brown's raid. And this took place in 1859. An abolitionist named John Brown and some of his supporters actually attacked and seized a U.S. Army arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And they planned to start a slave uprising. They were going to take the weapons, spread them out to slaves, and start an uprising. Well, U.S. troops took over the town, and they arrested John Brown and all of his helpers. They were put on trial, they were found guilty, and they were executed. People in the North treated Brown like he was a hero, and this made Southerners very, very mad.